Yeah. So good morning and good afternoon to everyone. We're here today with Joe Gilmer, who's the Executive Director of Development for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. And what we wanted to do this morning is kind of have a conversation with Joe. After we begin a little while, we'll open it up to some questions if you have any. But we wanted to uh, start to have a conversation about what people are doing across the country that is interesting in the areas of development and philanthropy, so that we could not only talk a little bit about technology, but more importantly, those best practices that are making a difference to help charities in their mission and ministry. So, Joe, thanks for making some time to talk to us. And maybe we could just start by talking a little bit about how you came into your current role with the Archdiocese.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. So thank you for that. Oh, how did I get into this? I think every single time in my career where uh, I've stepped away from working directly with the church, something happens and I get pulled right back in. And so that's now 24 years in the making in total. And I've been with the Archdiocese now for coming up on 7 years. And it was just like I was saying, every time I go to work on something else, something happens and I'm back at the church. And this time around, I'm like, fine, God, if this is what you want, this is where I'm going to be. And so I've been happily here. Most of my career has been working in diocesan campaigns. And so again, it's been a pleasure. And I finally listened, I guess, going on 7 years now.
And what is it that you most enjoy about working with development and fundraising?
Oh, it's great. What a great field. I know that each and every one of us probably have a really good story because until last 15 years or so, there weren't fundraising schools specifically, maybe nonprofit management or master's of public administration, but each and every one of us, there was something that kind of clicked into it. And in the world of development, I think that it's never a dull day. I don't remember the last time I looked at a clock thinking, oh, please, I just wish it got to 5 o'clock. I wish it was the end of the day. It's always looking at it going, you got to be kidding me. It's already 6 o'clock, 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And that's a sign of a really, really busy day, busy week. But it's a good busy. And at the end of the day, we can say, we've done something today. We've made a difference today, somewhere, somehow. And I'm just so blessed that we get that opportunity to have that other folks might look at it and say, gosh, I wish I could do that every day. And we do.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about what your annual fund is and kind of what it supports for the Archdiocese?
Yeah, so at the Archdiocese of Washington, our annual appeal is one that covers 70 different ministries. So there's many different types of appeals in many dioceses. Some are very specifically support for, say, like Catholic Charities. Archdiocese of Philadelphia is that way, for example. And there's other ones that might have a very, very heavy focus on particular areas. And ours is kind of spread across many, many, many different areas. And so among those things, one of the biggest areas of support is our seminarian program. In fact, we just had 16 ordained priests just about a month ago. And that's the largest class we've had in Washington since 1962. So it's a good example of you put enough effort into something, you will see that. And that's really a product of the vision of Cardinal Wuerl in building out a college seminary in Washington. So that's a pretty big part. Another big part of things are our pastoral ministries and social concerns and our Catholic education. So those are like really big pillars of that activity. And so that's the stuff that we do. Our program today is about $10.5 million a year that we raise. And we also have a number of signature projects that raise several million more dollars in very specific areas. Some that reinforce some of the things in the appeal, and some that are things that were born in the pandemic that have been very, very helpful and good things. And so we actually in total probably raise 16 to $18 million a year for a variety of causes that might climb to close to 100 ministries when it's all said and done.
That's fascinating. Now, there are a couple changes that you guys have helped make in the last couple of years that you think have helped with your success with regard to development.
Yeah, there's actually been a number of things. I'll cover two or three right now, and then our flow of our conversation, I'm happy to kind of point to other things. So for everybody on the call, it's not been all, easy driving here in the Archdiocese of Washington, and for any institution out there. But we've had our bumps in the road. We had some difficulties at the tail end of 2018 that has had a lasting effect, and the pandemic itself and trying to get folks back. So a number of things that we've had to do, in terms of modernizing our operations, relate to some of the technology. And I know that we're all on the call here for Patrick, so I'm going to talk about a couple things that are Give Central, but it's not because I'm a paid spokesperson for Give Central. They just genuinely are good things that if you see me on other podcasts, I talk about the very same things. So one of the things I've looked at is saying, well, if I don't have as many donors, or if I'm having more difficulties capturing things or staying on top of stewardship, then I need to look at some tools that can help me to get to our goals and build those relationships in another way. And the biggest one that's the top of mind that it's definitely been showing is the personalized URLs, so otherwise known as PURLs. The personalized URLs are simply this. Imagine a giving page. So whether you've got Give Central or any other the platforms out there or multiple ones, imagine getting a gift page, right? You're going to have a URL with that. One of the things that we've been having with, excuse me for a second, my phone is going off. One of the things that we have had over the last 3 years, at least now, is the ability to have an individualized giving page for every individual. So why is that important? Well, prior to that, you send out a direct mail piece, you have control of the request levels, right? And they could be very specific. It's just a matter of merging. But the moment that you drive someone to your online giving page, it's going to have a generalized set of request levels. Oftentimes they're going to be significantly lower. In other words, lowering the sites of donors, which is something you really don't want to do if you can help it. Same thing with if you're reaching out in other areas, utilizing QR codes, if you're utilizing text messaging outreach, flock notes, or what have you. With the PURLs, I keep the consistency of what I want X person to consider across several channels, nearly all of them, with the exception of the NPU, I now have control of. So I utilize the PURLs on a donate button. So, to adjust for that. So when someone clicks on donate, they're actually taken to a page, already has most of their information filled in, and they're looking at the request levels that are identical to what I had in the direct mail piece. And so we integrate that too, and making sure that you're not just doing something for the sake of it. And so that's one area. Another one related to technology would be one-clicks. So if you've got folks that are really making a decision on something in a matter of seconds, or they've been meaning to do things, we also utilize one-click emails. And so that's another technology, that's a Give Central technology that drops in a one-click. So you're on your email and it's like, oh, I want to renew. I want plus 5%, 10%, 25%, what have you, right in the email. And then once you click on that, you can send these to donors where you've got all their information already in your system. And then what it does is it basically takes you to a page that's effectively filled out. And it's one more click and they're on board. Because every time you make somebody click a second, third, fourth, fifth time, the chances of you securing that gift starts to drop dramatically. So we don't use the one click all the time, every time, partly because it's most powerful when you've got someone who makes all their giving in that electronic format. So you've got that background of giving already, but it's very, very strong, particularly early in the annual appeal for the folks who are the almost automatic renewals. And so it's another reinforcement that makes sure that we are not lowering sites and we're making it as easy as possible. So those are some things that we look at what can we do to make it as easy as possible and to be able to get that messaging out.
And for the coming year, are there additional changes that you guys are looking to make for the annual appeal that you think are important for others to consider as well?
Yeah, I mean, another thing that we've done, and this is out of a necessity, but it happened to work really well, and I can send samples of this to everybody here on the call. The NPU process. And so with the NPU process, what we found is that that channel has been kind of coming down over time, partly because we're better at reaching people via mail, via phone calls, via texting, via email, and these other ways in which we're reaching out, and partly because the attendance has been still lagging. And I imagine that everybody on the call probably has a similar situation. We have about 70% have come back versus 2019 headcount roles. So that's still significantly down below. And with the NPU, when those numbers drop down there, it's not just that you raise less money, but you're not reaching like that new pool of donors that you need to recharge. So a couple things that we've done with that is we have a giving week that we've instituted. So imagine what you do for Giving Tuesday, right? But we do that in the ramp up to the actual weekends that we do our appeal. So that kind of reinforces that messaging that gets out. Working with pastors to be able to make sure that they're putting out things like QR codes that are easy to be able to do, not just have the envelopes. The other thing we do too is that we've got scripts that build in both the digital explanation and the envelope explanation in one. So the talk actually isn't any longer than it was prior to doing that, to have a digital pledge card. So what we have is we have a form of the giving form that is effectively a digital pledge card, even with a bill me later option. And that follows with the envelope. So when a pastor is explaining it, he can walk parishioners through it and say, if you're on your phone, this is what you do. And it usually starts with a very simple landing page. It's just as choose your parish. And then once it's in there, then you're onto a giving page. It's got that stuff, and then they walk that through. So those are things that we have been working on more. We have these big boards when video aspects of things were still really important. That seems to be tying down a little bit. We utilize the inbound like text messaging. So text this keyword to this phone number, and it gives them a giving page back. So these are all kind of technology things that over the last couple of years we've been doing. And what we're looking to do as we continue to go forward is finding ways to be able to reinforce the relationships we have with pastors and to be more friendly. So this is the final point on this aspect, Patrick. This is also a universal problem. It's not just Washington. But one of the things that we struggle with is not necessarily right now people angry or saying, I'm not going to give to the archdiocese. I'm not going to give to the church. I'm really upset, or pastors feeling that way. Our bigger challenge is, how do you overcome apathy? How do you overcome, and even with the presentation of the appeal can be more of like, it's that time of the year, I'll give you 5 minutes, go ahead and do your thing. Well, we know that if scripts are followed and you're actually taking the time to explain, and you've got testimonial speakers that are there to say, I'm a beneficiary of this as a seminarian, for example, that has a huge difference in things. Well, the other way is the stuff that is not just send this and read this. And that is that, why are we here? Why are we here as a diocese or an archdiocese? We're here as a service. We are not the lords over parishes and stuff like that. We are an extension of them as a service to them. So reinforcing that all year long in any ways that you can helps to build out that not every time you make a phone call to a parish, you're asking them to do something for you, but rather, what can I do to help you? So we've been doing things like helping parishes first get online if they didn't. And now we've been helping them to tweak that, to put donate buttons in the right place, offering X, Y, and Z programs. We have this parish support initiative this summer. In fact, we're going to launch it in 2 weeks. It's now 4 years. We drive people to a landing page that's got every parish's own giving page. So it's not stuff that comes through the Archdiocese. Encouraging them to go up and get connected with recurring giving or make a gift with the parish. And even though we're a little bit further afield from the worst of the pandemic time, it's still something that we find is moving things. And then we look at other things. What else do we have in expertise that we may not be able to do it for every parish, but we can help with language, help with, we liquidate stock for parishes. So, and we don't charge them a percentage. We offer cryptocurrency donation platforms and widgets that parishes can actually put on their own website. They don't have to do all the legwork of setting those things up. We reach out for language for if you have a parishioner that puts the parish in the will, we'll actually put you in our society as well. We offer charitable gift annuities, and the same thing. It doesn't have to be the Archdiocese as a beneficiary if it's a parish or school. So these are these items. And then the other thing we do are massive Thanksgiving. So among many stewardship things, I might jump the gun here a little bit, Patrick, if we're going to get into some stewardship stuff later, but I'll touch upon this now. We can come back to it as well. One of the many things we do to try to make a contact point, because it's a challenge as an archdiocese, you don't have the same contact that, say, a parishioner would have with their pastor of their parish on a weekly or monthly basis. Our Masses of Thanksgiving, we started this back in 2021. And what it is that instead of one Christmas reception with the Archbishop that we used to do in December, we go out and have him lead Mass for twice in the spring, twice in the fall, at parishes out in the field. And then we invite, we do a circle of things, and we invite parishioners to come out to celebrate the generosity, to celebrate that connectedness. And it's been a great way for the Cardinal to get out. It's a great way for people to have met him. It's a whole lot harder for someone to have generalized thoughts once they have met you. Like the moment that someone stops referring to your office as development and they say your name, like Joe, as opposed to development says this. Well, it's very easy to demonize something like that. And so it's been good for the Cardinal. People have loved it. Pastors have loved it because it's just this really good thing. And we don't ask of anything. And we always hand out things such as like prayer books and what have you. These are the things where we're coming to people and we're demonstrating gratitude in deeper ways and also a service in different ways. And the more that they see that, you're not going to win everybody over at once, but you do that with consistency. It answers the question that might be in the back of many donors' heads. What's their purpose? Why should I give to them? We are in an environment, and whether it had to go through scandal issues and difficulties and things of that nature or not, we always had the benefit before of almost an obligation to give to a diocese, archdiocese appeal, what have you, like it's expected of you. And shifting to the perspective of we have to demonstrate accountability, transparency, and impact like every other nonprofit out there. We should have been doing this the entire time, but now it kind of has to be. And while it's a little painful initially to have to really go much deeper, what's important is doing that is the right thing to do, regardless of why we're getting to that now. But you'll find over time, you'll have a stronger, more closely connected set of donors, which is how you are successful over time and not just transactional. Sorry about that.
And one of the things too, just to talk a little bit about, your idea of gathering people together to, to meet the bishop or meet some of the people involved in the ministries, is sometimes we've encouraged people also to invite those who aren't giving currently, who may have had a little bit of a broken relationship with that, because sometimes we need to work on repairing and rebuilding those relationships in order to really get them engaged from a stewardship and giving perspective.
Yeah. On that point, Patrick, two thoughts. One is going to be like kind of our development, toolkit of things. And the other one is to reinforce beyond development stuff, how important what Patrick just said is. So the first one is, let me do the technical first, is that among your databases probably skews a bit older. be aware that folks who might think about legacy giving, that uh, those folks may not actually tell you. So if you're not reaching out to invite, they might not tell you, and it's a shame because you can't thank them until it's too late, and you may not be aware of it to be able to carry out their wishes. So paying attention to this stuff is important. But the other aspect of that is often what will happen is when somebody is getting closer to um, their time, is that things get rocky in a number of different areas. And one of the things you might notice is a consistent donor. And by the way, the small dollar consistent donors are the folks that are most likely to think about you in legacy plans. It's not necessarily just the major donors. You suddenly see somebody stop giving for 3 or 4 years. It's a natural inclination for us. You only have so many resources to go, okay, well, I'm only going to reach out to people who have given in the last 36 months, 48 months. You should make sure that you build into your engagement multiple touch points per year, even with the folks who have stopped giving to you, because for some folks who have thought of you in the will, in estate plans or what have you, they stop giving because of other things happening. But if you stop communicating back, if there's going to be a change in that will, you're going to be at a high risk that you're going to be forgotten. Not to mention, you don't want to reinforce something where like, we only care about you when you give to us. So unless somebody says to you, I don't want you to reach out to me, and you got your flags for that, you should be trying for that. And what Patrick's also talking about too is we're also a ministry. So development, here's one of the things that oftentimes I think can get forgotten, even within your own buildings, right? Like development isn't thought of as a ministry, and it absolutely is, because we do quite a bit of evangelization and the lifting up of the good works of the church. And we are a complement to the communications office, a complement to pastoral ministries and social concerns, social justice. We're complementary to the Catholic schools office. So we're a part of that, and staying a part of that and finding ways to say, you know, X department working on evangelization, knowing what they're doing, not just to raise awareness for fundraising, but to go, oh, you know what? We can also incorporate this thing you're working on here when we're at these Mass of Thanksgiving, when we're at charitable dinners, when we are reaching out for Advent and Lent, sending out prayer books, and all the other ways that we're touching people in a stewardship fashion. We can help with that. So the way to do that, of course, is make sure that you don't accidentally get siloed from the other offices within the building, because it's only together. We can't do it alone, but it's together we can do a lot of great things. One last point on that, and that relates to Christian stewardship. So oftentimes, we think about this offertory increase programs, enhancement programs. It's the first thing we might think about. Well, there's two other aspects of that. There is the engaging folks to share their talents or their volunteerism, and it's getting folks back to church. And so one of the things that we do here at the Archdiocese, and we're really encouraging pastors to not just do one part, and that is we have a very inexpensive 6-week program for offertory enhancement. But we also offer as well that we can help you during Lent, for example, for getting people back to church. So that time aspect of stewardship. And again, we're not going to be able to change everything just with what we do, but it can work part and parcel with what a parish is doing. And then maybe in the spring to do ministry fairs, which would be about the talent aspect. And then often what happens then is that treasure aspect becomes a natural extension. Now that someone sees it as, it's not the church, it's our church, my church. So it's an extension of who they are. So suddenly the giving doesn't feel like oh, they're hitting me up, but rather I'm helping to invest in this community that I am very much a part of. Again, you can't do it just alone, but you could be a pretty important part of that to reinforce that. And then when you do that, when the outreach is, it's one's, oh, of course they're doing that. Yeah. And not as opposed to like, oh, the church is asking again, but rather going, I understand what we're doing there, even if they don't give to each and everything. So those are the items that, from a stewardship standpoint, remembering first and foremost, you've got to put on a whiteboard. You are just as much of a ministry as every other aspect of the church. Absolutely.
And Joe, one of the things, like you're talking about different ways to reach out to different groups to get them engaged. One of the things that we hear sometimes is that, whether it's a parish or diocese, is like our people are too old, or we don't have enough English speakers, or our people are too urban, or our people are too rural.
Yeah.
So any of this new stuff that you're talking about just isn't going to work for us.
Yeah, I get that all the time. I'll give you two quick stories that hopefully will disabuse that. Before getting to that, what I would say too is that when somebody does say that, I wouldn't immediately kind of put it down, right? Because just think about with yourself. If you got a, you're thinking about something like, oh, well, I'm not this and that or whatever, and someone immediately shoots down whatever that thought is right there, it it's not likely to be something where like I'd be like, you know what, you're right. It might be where like, oh, well, like almost offended. So acknowledging first off and allowing that point of view to come across without it me being like attack that message that could make someone feel like they're being attacked. It's about being heard, even if it's something where I'll hear some people saying things. I'm like, in my mind, I might be thinking that's a terrible instinct. Like, but you don't want to come out to say something be like, yeah, that's a bad idea. Like, oh yeah, they're going to listen to what I want to tell them after that. No, so letting that kind of wash over, go, oh no, I appreciate you sharing me with that. So a couple things that I have found, and oftentimes it might just be reinforcing it. And one day someone goes, okay, I'm going to give this a go. And one was back in 2016, I was down in Florida on donor visits and a conference. And I'm taking West Palm Beach Airport to get back. I'm in the airport, and at the time, geez, what was 16, 4, 8? I was just about 40. I'm 48 today, 49 come October. It feels like it's just yesterday, but time flies. So I'm in the airport, and I noticed a couple of things. One, outside of a few grandchildren here and there, I was one of the youngest guys in the entire airport. So it was something else. But then the realization hit me as I'm looking around, and I noticed all these folks who are grandparents, great grandparents, 60s, 70s, 80s, they're all on cell phones, and they're all looking at them as if like they're 15-year-olds. And it hit me to go because I was running that same kind of trap. I had an older demographic, and my thought was the pathway was no computer to a desktop to a laptop to a iPad to a smartphone. And that, oh, these folks wouldn't respond onto a social media or to make a gift using their phone. And the truth of it was there was a technology jump that you didn't have to go through that linear line. Why? Because the connection point for these grandparents were, if they didn't have a smartphone, they're less likely to be able to have Facebook, for example. So following the grandkids or their children and staying on top of those things was important. They may not know every single feature of that phone, but they were much more comfortable with a smartphone than we gave folks credit for. And it immediately made me think of, don't limit certain parts of technology. So another aspect would be QR codes. So with QR codes, that was very much oh, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know how to use it with my phone. Well, because of the pandemic and coming back to restaurants, almost everybody had to use QR codes to look at a menu, for example. And so that's another technology jump. And I just had an event a few months ago, and one of the organizers says, you have these cards on the tables to be able to make a gift and up on your screens. Well, everybody I know doesn't use that, And I said, well, okay. I said, well, I'll bring some paper forms as well. I said, but it's not an either or. It would be an and. And in fact, nobody filled out the form, and everybody who made that gift did it via QR code that night. And so it was one of those things of going like, I'm not going to stop doing one thing, but it's an and. And so those kinds of things, that have happened, I've had people say over and over again, oh, our people don't do this. I had a pastor for online giving, have an online giving button, told me in the summer of 2020, we had gotten all the parishes with a giving page. There were about 40 parishes that didn't, and we made a temporary page for a Give Central page. And then we were working with them to get them a permanent, their own thing. And I had one pastor with a pretty big parish in a pretty wealthy area of our diocese. And he said, my people don't give online. My people don't use credit cards to give. My people, would rather it just be checks. And again, I didn't tell him, well, you're wrong for that. I said, well, let me go ahead and give you this page anyway. Let's get that up on your website. And he was raising $4,000 or $5,000 a month for about a year before I said, if you have your own, you don't have to wait for me to process and then write you out a check or send you over an ACH. And the moment he put that on there, I think he didn't realize just how many people, the convenience factor. And so that's one of the big things here is always looking for ways to make it easier. It's not to say that there were some people that maybe eschew that, but I wouldn't just not have it on that kind of broad generalization. Those broad generalizations are the kinds of things that, it's to your own pearl, for that. And so again, I didn't tell the pastor he was wrong. I gave him the benefits of having the online giving and then, the stuff in the summertime. But I said, why don't I give you this? And let's see what happens. If you're right, like it's not going to cost you anything. I'm paying for that, for the merchant fees and things of that nature for that page. So it's not going to cost you anything to have that. And then about a year later is when he went ahead and did that. So those assumptions are things just to be careful of. And my take on stuff is it's an and, not an or. One
Yeah.
very, very close. Yeah, I'm sorry, Patrick. One other really closely related thing before I forget it, relating to this as well. You'll get folks who might say the opposite, that they might assume that there are certain things that people don't do that anymore. You should only have X technology. I would be careful with that too. So for example, I'll have people challenge me about direct mail, and I will say to them, well, direct mail, it's a mature channel. What does that mean? It means I can't, if I want to raise double the money, I can't send mail to double the people and expect that. It's got its place there, but it's not over with. In fact, it's still neck and neck with online giving as our number one channel for fundraising. It's one of those things where I look at it and I say, well, they help each other. So one of the things we might talk about would be multi-channel integrated marketing. And so with that, it's not that you don't direct mail, it's that be aware of integrating them so that if you got someone sending you emails, they may not respond to the email, but they go, oh, that direct mail piece is what I want to do, and vice versa. So thinking in that way, but I get a lot of people who say, people don't do that anymore. Even the people don't write checks anymore. I'm like, okay, well, you might not write a check, but I've got 8,000, 10,000 checks I'm receiving each and every year, specifically on checks. That still happens. So just to be aware that that technology thing could be both ways. The blind spot about, oh, my people don't do that, or my people are super tech and nobody writes a check anymore. Both of those extremes, could end up being lost opportunities for engagement.
Yeah, I think like when you use the word and, is that one of the things that we see a good bit is telling people that both communications and giving now are more diverse than ever, and it's an and not an or. Some people are going to prefer direct mail. Some people are going to prefer the bulletin. Other people are going to prefer email. Other people are going to prefer social media. Some people will prefer checks. Some people will prefer cash or a donor advised fund or credit card or online. And it's not for us to choose for them. It's to try for us to make it as easy for them as possible. Although the one thing that we do see across the board is that nowadays, more than ever, and you used the Pearl as an example, people want things to be easy and personalized if possible. So even if it's a piece of direct mail, if I can put a personal QR code on the bottom of the direct mail, that can help with the response. If I can send a communication and not just say, dear member, but I can, have information about Joe or remember someone's anniversary or remember someone's birthday, those personal things are going to make a big difference.
Yeah. And to that point, earlier, I was mentioning as well, in diocese environments, our problems typically aren't we don't have enough donors or we don't have enough people to work with for for furthering the mission. Our issues are going to be more about we have a sea of donors and very limited staff. And so how do we create that connection that is what somebody experiences at a parish level? We're never going to get to that quite of extent, but what are some things we can do to make this engagement much more personal? Because you really do, the more you can go from a transactional type of relationship, that check for once a year or going online once a year, to understanding all the different things that we do as an organization to further the church and the ministries and the good works of the church for folks. And as often as possible, integrating personalization, that you're not, that person's not just a number to you in your system as a donor ID number, that those are the things that will make the difference between sustained giving, no matter what the environment is around you, recessions or, X, Y, and Z happening. It's when you have those things, that's how you have a stronger organization, more fundamentally solid, not just a loose, I made a gift here for it. And again, you're never going to be able to be personal to the extent that all of us would want to be. But the more that you try to do that, it will work out over time. And it's not just the money we're talking about. Again, we're a ministry of the church too. So the more personalization that you can find without breaking the bank on stuff, the better.
And so, you talked about like the fundraising for the annual fund. And I think your fund has been going up, each of the last years, while necessarily not, that hasn't been the experience across the board. But one of the challenges we sometimes see is that our databases don't necessarily always have the most current information. They may not have the most current email or may have the most current phone number for donors, at least the mobile phone number. And so one of the things that we've been suggesting outside of the giving, which kind of gets at the relationship, is maybe you ask people to share a prayer request or at least share their contact information so you can update them. Because let's say you have 1 million potential donors in a given diocese or 100,000. You may only have 10 or 20,000 contacts in your database or 30,000 contacts, but there's a lot more out there. So,
Yeah.
Can I ask them to share share a prayer request or share something and then use that as an impetus to start to work on a conversation that you could have with them?
Yeah. No, I think that is really, really good practices to have. One is it's an outreach that's not asking something like a financial request. It is an offering of service. So what Patrick just talked about here is part and parcel with that service mindset. And so offering things like prayer intentions. And I know we can do prayer intentions where someone pays $1 for a candle or a prayer intention, but we do this at the Archdiocese for staff. We've got prayer intentions that get set up every single week. And you can put anything in there. And we will often, when we learn of a donor that's struggling, someone that's reached out to us, maybe they were reaching out to us who said, I want to support this, but I can't, but I want you to know why for it. And it's usually something that's a struggle in their lives. The first thing we do is that we completely understand, because again, giving is entirely voluntary. No one has to do anything, and nobody is bad or evil if they don't give. What that would be is if we're not living up to expectations, it's on us to earn that. But the other thing too is that I tell my staff all the time, when you're in these kind of conversations, any thoughts about the fundraising aspect of your work needs to stop, and you need to put your pastoral hat on. And if the more that you can proactively reach out for the folks who don't think to call you, there are thousands of people that are hurting in other ways. And if you can encourage that, find ways to do that, it's not expensive. It's not as time intensive as it might seem. And maybe in concert with one of the departments within your diocese, like your pastoral ministry or the equivalent of that, that you're working together and that maybe you're the outlet for letting people know about X happening. So those are all things that are items that you can facilitate. And again, you never know when that one phone call or that one intention or that one moment where someone was really needing just some help or just to hear something out. You never know, what kind of life you've improved right then and there, regardless of what kind of fundraising comes of it. It's just a good thing to do. And the more often you can do it, I know we're all strapped on staff, but the more often you can do those kind of things, it's
Joe, I think you froze on us there a little bit. Okay, we'll give him a second to come back. And while I'm waiting for Joe to come back, are there any questions that you guys have specifically you'd like us to ask Joe? No? Okay. I think he's going to come back in a second. Sorry about that. So, one of the things I'll just mention too when Joe's talking about the differences is we have seen in the last year two of the things that people are starting to do a little bit more is again encouraging recurring giving over the pledging. Not that pledging still isn't important, but we sometimes are now seeing some annual funds starting with almost like up to a third to a half of their funds already kind of pre-raised because people are continuing the gift year over year, which we didn't really see before COVID. So that's, one of the big trends that we've seen over the last couple years is that giving people that option to make the gift recurring versus a pledge has been something that's been interesting to see. The other part that was interesting for us to see is on the direct mail, which we do still see as being really significant for everyone that does a large capital campaign or large annual fund, is that including a personal QR code at the bottom often kind of doubles the impact for a mailing. So that, if you're doing a mailing and you might get, I don't know, 100,000 in gifts, and your response rate might be 8%, with the QR code, it might take the response rate up to 13%. And instead of 100,000, now you're getting 150,000. So, one of the things that Joe brought up is that these things are additive and not subtracting, so it isn't like we would ever think like, don't do the bulletin or don't do direct mail or don't do some of the major giving activities that we historically do. No, we should be doing all of those things, because if we can take the participation up overall from 8% to 9% to 10%, now, the math says that the giving is going to go up dramatically across the board. Okay, well, the other thing that we're also seeing which is surprising, is the texting capability in Pew. Oh, there's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hey, sorry about that, guys. Somebody must have hit a line in my neighborhood because my entire internet connection went down. I had to flip to my phone mobile hotspot. It probably gave people a chance to actually talk, except instead of me. So it was probably actually a good 3 or 4 minute break there.
So let me ask you a question. So now that you've been in DC a while, if you could give yourself advice for when you're first taking over as the director there, what would you have done differently?
Um, you know, I think that, and this might get because I'm being told my internet connection is unstable again for the zone. Somebody did something, knocked out a tower around here.
Um,
It's not like a did I lose you guys again?
you did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you can hear me. All right. So what I'm gonna do
Yeah.
temporarily, guys, is I'm gonna turn off my video so that you're more likely at least to be able to hear me. So let me do that. Okay. Can you guys still hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. All right. So that might help that connection a little bit. So for me, isn't something where I go, oh, that was a big mistake. We should never have done that. I think that the bigger thing would have been to more quickly move to not just modernize our development operations, but more quickly to be engaged with that relationship building at a fundamental level with pastors and with parish leaders and having the cardinal engage in many, many more ways than just say our appeal weekend and a reception in the fall, that I would have moved on that more quickly, because those are things that are beneficial as time goes on. And so if I was immediately doing that within the first few weeks of starting, I think that we could even be in a better place than we are today. So it's never too late to start, but if I was to start here all over again, my first thoughts would not just be about how do I hit this goal or this outreach piece or some of the other fundamentals. I would be focusing on the relationship building. And when I came on board, it was just basically appeal, 3 mailings, telemarketing in the summer, and that was it. So we did move on technology really quickly, but that other side of it that you can't calculate right away, but is so important. I think I would have spent even more time on that. The pandemic made it to be absolutely critically important. But I would have started that right away, not wait a few months to kind of get my feet under me, because there's no being wrong in engaging in stronger relationships. There's never going to be a time where you go, oh, I should have done less of that. So it's not one of those ones where you could have a misstep because you haven't gotten a lay to the land yet, because it's always an important thing. And so yeah, that would be the item that if I were to go back, I'd start that sooner and with more vigor.
And if you were, kind of talking to some of your colleagues and they were looking at, you know, the major part of their fundraising focus has been direct mail. What are some of the things that you would suggest to them? Consider doing this, this year and next year as options, for you to help build and grow your annual fund.
Yeah, I would say like the direct mail piece itself is to make sure you've got multiple ways to give right in that direct mail piece to encourage someone to go here. The QR codes, as we talked about, they're not hard to generate. And in fact, most mail shops, when you send over your list, if you're working with your CRM, your database, they have the ability to do this, to create a field for you for basically a website for the QR code, or in the case of, I was talking about this personalized URLs, it's dropped right in there and it merges it right into a QR code. So it's not expensive or even a hard lift for that. But have those in there, because at the end of the day, I'm not paying as much attention to say outright, this channel was attributable for this much money. I'm looking at instead the for something like that, is that overall are all the boats lifting. So I continue to do telemarketing to this day, even though as a channel by itself, it doesn't perform as well, lower redemption rates, lower average gifts, but it probably has a pretty big impact on getting people to open their mail, getting people to go look at that email because I'm reinforcing it. That's that integrated marketing. So those are the things that, I would say to somebody. I would never say to somebody, oh, direct mail, like, that's all you do. Like, you need to drop that, get into the 21st century. Well, I will tell you first, if you were to drop that, doing electronic only, someone might think that that doesn't cost anything. It absolutely does. And response rates for, say, a direct mail piece might be, 5 or 10% on any one given thing for it. In email, it might be you send out 50,000 emails and you get, 180 clicks and maybe 20 gifts, for that. So you'd have to do an enormous amount of email to make that be a replacement. And chances are you would just drive people so crazy about it that it would be less effective pretty quickly. The other things that I encourage folks relating to some of this stuff is data integrity. And Patrick, you were talking about this, or starting to touch upon this as well. Outside of actually fundraising, one of the other big benefits you can do for yourself is to periodically be scrubbing your lists. Even the stuff that you get from the parishes via Impuse and stuff like that, there are services out there where it's not that expensive to run them. Just as an example, and they don't pay me for this, so this is not a paid advertisement. I utilize Real Validation for checking phone numbers. So in our system, when I first got here, it was home, work, husband work, wife work, etc., as the tag for a given email or phone number. But I didn't know, was that a cell phone or was that a landline? And that's important when you want to try to do texting campaigns, for example. And so these kind of services will not only tell you, is that phone working or not? It also could tell you what kind of connection is. They can even tell you what provider and who owns it, although that's a little bit more, I wouldn't take that to the bank. Like with wealth screening, you don't just take those numbers as they are. You look at it as directional. And then for email, similar kind of thing, running that with some regularity, because what happens is if you don't do that, you're going to have some cruddy data, which means you're going to get a lot of bounces. And in email, for example, if you have too many bounces, you don't get beat up for unsubscribes, but you will get beat up for bounces and for people who mark you as spam. And so one of the ways you can lower that threshold is constantly checking those email addresses to make sure they're still valid. Because it helps your delivery rates to everything else. If you have too low of delivery rates, other domains will start to think of you as a spammer, even if you're not. And you'll find that your message doesn't get there in the first place. So those kinds of things, I do those at least 2 or 3 times a year. And I'll run some lists through it and then make sure you get it back into your database and not just on your spreadsheet. And then the other thing you want to do too is, if like with Give Central's got a database set up for us, right? And then our 2 systems talk back and forth, is also making sure that this information is also getting back to Give Central as an online giving provider. So you don't forget, where else do you have these things, particularly if they're not talking to each other entirely directly. So remembering those kind of items, because that matters. Plus, we're talking about personalization, how frustrating it is if someone calls and says, hello, Mr. Glimler, blah, 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 blah. How are you? And it'd be like, well, it's not Glimler, it's Gilmer, like right off the bat, it'd be like, you don't even got my name right. So double checking that, paying attention to somebody types some stuff in, it's all capital letters, cleaning that data is going to have a real big benefit for you. A lot more than you think. It's boring, but it's a good thing to do.
Okay. Well, thanks, Joe, for, taking the time. I'll just turn it back to see, are there any questions that you have for Joe right now?
Hi, this is Evan from the Diocese of San Jose, and a couple things.
Wait,
I would be,
quick. Did you say San Jose?
yes, Deacon Eric.
Tell Deacon Eric.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go there. Deacon Eric. Yeah.
Tell him he needs to call me, because I just want to hear his voice. I love him.
Can do. Can do. So the question was, what is the CHMS that you do have behind the connects to Give Central?
Give Central is one of the ones. Our database system is from a company called Emergent. They're now part of the Moore Group. It's called Portfolio. It's a good system. Okay. It's not, it's not necessarily like it's the best system in the world. Everybody needs to change tomorrow. It's good. Compared to a lot of things I've done. but they're relatively small. And
Okay.
so relatively small means there's a lot of providers out there who won't do an open API, which would
Yes.
mean that we get the systems to talk directly without me having to export, import, right? Give Central is one of the ones that partners with that. And again, Patrick's not paying me, just
I-
let you know about one of I really appreciate the fact that what I see with Give Central is in particular is that they go out of their way to be that partner and not just a service, but a partner, and their openness to
Looks like we cut him off because he was saying something nice.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Hey, let me take the minute to say we felt Sue and I are both from the Diocese of San Jose, and we feel like we were listening they were singing to the choir. We were doing a lot of those same things, and absolutely concur that the pearls, the the smart emails, all that stuff, we have seen huge things happen as a result of that. So just again, unpaid, but yeah, we love partnering with Give Central.
No, and we love working, with you guys. Bridget in particular is always saying how wonderful it is to work with.
As a matter of fact, we have to go because we have a meeting with Janet and Bridget next. So
Okay, well, you can tell them mean things then when you say
I will say
hello.
you said all kinds of horrible things about me.
So, well, we'll thank everyone for joining us, and really appreciate this. Was this a useful conversation today?
Absolutely.
Because one of our thoughts is to, periodically now invite, other kind of executive directors and foundations to kind of talk about what they're doing. Because our thought process is, yes, we may be in one part of the country versus another, but we're doing similar things from a work and ministry standpoint.
Indeed. One other thing that I did write down, just saw my note, is I would be curious to know those services that he uses to ensure the quality of the data. That's something that's directly something that I try to do here, and would be very interested in the services that he uses.
Okay, well, we'll look that up. So,
Thank you.
and thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone.